I'm Pastor Tom, and welcome to the Sunday Sermon.
You got to move, 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 child, you got to move, got to move, 'cause when the Lord gets ready.
This is Ecclesiastes 3, verses 16 through 22. I have seen under the sun that in the place of justice there is wickedness, in the place of righteousness there is wickedness. And I said to myself, God will judge both the righteous and the wicked, for there's a time for every matter, for every deed. And then I said to myself, concerning human beings, God has surely tested them in order to see that in fact they're just animals. For isn't the fate of a human being the same as the fate of an animal? As one dies, so the other dies. In fact, don't they just have the same breath? So there is no advantage to be human over being an animal? It's all vanity. They all go to the same place. All come from the dust, all return to the dust. And who knows for sure that the breath of a human ascends upward while the breath of the beast descends into the earth? So I've seen that there is nothing better than this. One should be happy in one's activities. This is your lot. For who will enable you to see what will occur after you? So the preacher, the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes, the voices of Solomon, is exploring an idea. See, we all have these times of despair and darkness and difficulty when we think, what's the point? Is it worth it? It's always the same. Nothing ever changes. We try really hard to make an advancement, and then it falls back again. And so we get to those places, and when we get there, there's a lot of times we're just like, and we don't have anything left. It's like all hope is gone. And so a lot of times people will come along and go, you should be hopeful. The Lord will prevail, and like the words of hope. The Bible's full of the words of hope. But instead, what he does is he gets there ahead of us, and he basically says, you're feeling hopeless? Maybe you're right. Like, thanks. You're supposed to make me feel happy. And he goes, no. That doesn't mean that life isn't still worth it. There's still joy. There's still happiness. You've been given stuff to do. It's worth doing. And it's okay. So that's what he's doing. He's exploring these ideas. And part of this particular piece here is where he's looking at the problem of death. Because in a sense, death sort of, whatever, makes an end to whatever we're doing. It's like, well, you die, and then what? Who cares, right? So you do all this work, and then you die. And so he wants to kind of get at that. He wants to beat us to it. That's the thing you have to understand. He's trying to beat us to it. Before we contemplate these things and get all depressed, he's already there waiting for us with this idea. No, really, you have a thing to do, and it's worth doing, that sort of conclusion of his. But in order to do that, he has to acknowledge the argument, the feeling that people have. And he's like, no, think about it. Everything dies. Are we really like that special in this world? Should we really be thinking that way? I'm from Minnesota, as you are. I grew up being told, you shouldn't be too proud because you're nothing special. Right? That's a minute. I grew up, you're nothing special. Well, that was pretty good. We never say, that was great, that was awesome. We go, yeah, that was pretty good, yeah. Because if we said it was awesome, we're saying somebody's special. And no. Everybody's special, so you're nothing special. But we tend to think of ourselves as human beings as special somehow. We have this image, it's derived from something in the Psalms, but we see it this way: God, us, angels, animals, right? We see that as a kind of hierarchy. Like we're like this separate order of being. And so when I read this text and I see some of the stuff that is said here, it takes me wandering down the yellow brick road of theology, because I'm like, Okay, so everything comes from dust and returns to dust, and he asks that question, right? Is the breath, by the way, you need to know this. The word breath in Greek and in Hebrew has a double meaning, triple meaning. It means breath, it means life force, as in breath of life, and it means spirit, as in that, whatever that intangible aspect of ourselves is. So that one word does a lot of work. And it does here, because when he says, are not the breath of a human being and the breath of an animal the same, it sounds like he's talking about the breath of life. Because they both die, they both, the bodies decay, they both go to dust. And then he says this, how do you know that a human's breath, now it's shifted in meaning, a human spirit is what he's shifted over to, goes up, but the spirit of an animal just becomes part of the ground. How do you know that? And so this raises this really fascinating question, which is, what is the nature of what it means to be human? And this question has been, it's just helpful to kind of have this as background, because to understand the Bible, we have to also understand the worldview that's being spoken to, and also it helps us to understand what other people's worldviews are. Like, there's different views and understandings of what is a human being, what makes a human being, and are we really different from the animals or just part of the animal world? And so knowing the sort of theological viewpoints on this, when you run into them, for example, in the scriptures, there's places where some of these ideas are being played out in conversations Paul is having, like in 1 Corinthians. And there's the way the rabbis and the old theologians used to look at Genesis, and these questions were just out there, and then how they interacted with ideas that came out of the Greco-Roman world, ideas of Plato. So bear with me, theology. I love theology. Okay, so here's the first one. A human being, an animal, we're just dust. God forms us, breathes into the nostrils the breath of life, the life force, and now you have nephesh, which is a Hebrew word which is sometimes translated soul, but a better translation probably would be a living person or a living being, right? So this is the description in Genesis chapter 2 of the creation of that original human, that Adam. The word Adam just means human. It later becomes a name, but originally it means it's Ha-Adam, the human. God forms Ha-Adam, the human being, the Adam, from the dust of the earth, breathes into the nostrils the breath of life, the life force, and you have a person suddenly. And so out of this comes this idea that a human being is animated dust, so to speak, that's what we are, that we're created, that there's dust, and then when the end of it, when the breath leaves and it's over, that's the end of us. And so there are theological traditions that say that's the whole of life, there's nothing else. And there's also a theological tradition that says that's right, and that would be the end of it if it wasn't for the fact that God remembers us. And because God remembers us, at resurrection, God can reconstitute us. So let me try to explain that, because when I first ran into this idea, it was a philosophy professor of mine way back when I was in college. That was a long time ago. This was before personal computers, but he was like seeing ahead. So I thought it was, when we got there, I was really brilliant. So imagine this. Imagine you've got a computer, and it's got, like we've got right now, Siri and everything on our phones. Siri is the newest generations of these kinds of things are artificial intelligence, so they learn, they pick up your habits and patterns and stuff. So let's imagine that I've got my phone, and on my phone is Siri, and Siri gets to know my shortcuts and comes to understand my preferences. So when I ask for something, Siri kind of knows what I'm asking for and anticipates it. Siri starts to anticipate things like, you know what time it is, you should be on the road now. Time for you to get going, right? Stuff like that. And then my phone gets broken. So I have to buy a new phone, and then it says, do you want to restore your phone from a backup? And I go, oh yeah. And I back up my phone, and it's a brand new phone, so it's faster, it's got more memory, prettier screen, bigger, because I'm old and I need bigger screens. And then Siri's still there, and she's the same Siri that she was before. Or Alexa, if you do that kind. right? But she's the same. She's not, in other words, she's not lost. All that data that is her was remembered, and it was resurrected in a new body, which was way better. And so that's one view, that God remembers us. Behold, I've inscribed you in the palms of my hands. We read that in the book of Isaiah, that this idea is that God remembers who we are, and then in resurrection, there's a new body which is substantially better than the current one. But all that we have been remembered by God is there in this new, you might say, downloaded into this new reality. So that's one idea, okay? That we only exist as long as we exist, both as physical beings and as the information, the data, the story of our lives. That's one. Number two, this idea starts to develop. It's not actually, you won't find this in the Old Testament, older stuff. You see it start to hint at in the later materials that are written, like this hint of this other thing going on. It comes kind of out of Greek philosophy. And it's this idea that at some point, God inserts something unique and special, which is the real you, into the body, which is just a body. And that real you, we use the term soul for that. In the Bible, the word soul would not mean, if you see the word soul in the Bible, it does not mean that. The word soul, especially in the New Testament, that means mind, psyche. The word soul, or just life. But you see the word spirit translated in your English translation, that's more what we mean by soul nowadays. We mean this thing that's the real me, that is occupying this body for now, and that this thing had a beginning. At some point, God made it and stuck it in the body. But it will exist forever. So it is an immortal soul. That's an important word. Immortal, meaning it has a beginning, but it doesn't have an ending. And so the real me, in this viewpoint, is my soul, and the body is just the thing I'm occupying for now. Meat puppet, if you will. It's the meat puppet that my soul is in. And so that's a very different viewpoint. That is not really, it's hard to fully jive that with the biblical account. You have to come up with kind of if you really want to do this as strict biblical theology, you have to say, if you want to go with that, you go, but what makes a person is the union of soul and body. That's what a person is. So when the person dies and the soul persists, they're kind of not there until there's a new body again, because you need the integration of body and soul to have the person. Okay? And so you see that actually in Paul, because he's actually talking about that in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, how can some people say there's no resurrection of the dead? He says, this is what it's like. He says, yeah, what is sown, the body that dies, is perishable, it's weak, but what is raised, imperishable. Yes, there is an earthly body. There's also a heavenly body, right? So Paul is talking about that idea that this thing, this essential piece of our reality, which persists beyond our death, ultimately is restored with a body, so we are fully ourselves, only upgraded at some point in the future at resurrection. So that's the second idea. Here's the third idea, less common in mainstream Christianity, but fairly common in some of the fringe types. So Christianity has always been very complicated with lots of different denominations, and some of them start to have interesting theological ideas. So this comes in the sort of fringe works. Nowadays, what we would call Gnostic religions, Gnostic Christianities tend to think this, but a lot of other religions hold this too, and that's this. The body is merely a shell, and that thing which is me is an eternal spirit. Catch that distinction of word? Eternal spirit, not immortal. Eternal, always existed. Has its source in God. You might say comes from God. In some sense, you might say is God. On some level, maybe small g, and enters the body, and at some point returns to the union with the one, returns to the source. I picture a drop of water coming off, like this is me in Hawaii. Everyone else goes to Hawaii and they enjoy themselves. I contemplate the nature of the soul. Right? But I see the wave crash, boom, and these big waves. I'm ignoring the surfers. I'm looking at the wave. Little drops of water in the air. And I go, oh, that's like this idea of the self, that it's that droplet of water that's been kind of hurled off of the ocean, has an experience for a while, and then will eventually return to the ocean where that drop ceases to exist, and yet it is not lost, it continues. But it's just part of the whole now. It's no longer a unique drop of water, it's just part of the whole. That's the idea, that's this particular idea, that there's this eternal spark that has somehow sparked off of the divine, ultimately returns to the divine. In the meantime, is enjoying a human experience. That's what the bumper sticker literally says. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. Now, that is not typically Orthodox Christianity. That is Gnostic Christianity. You'll find variations on that in Hinduism and Buddhism. Ideas of reincarnation are based on that the journey of the soul is a journey of return, and so you have to go through successive lives to get there. That's where that comes from. Now, I'm telling you this because it's easier to talk to people if you can understand what they're talking about. Like when you start talking with somebody from a different tradition, especially if it's not a Western tradition, some of it won't make a lot of sense, and then you go, oh, I see. You're talking about the eternal self that continues from life to life. I'm talking about an immortal self that has a start but not an ending. That's why we're talking a little differently. Okay? So there you go. By the way, I don't have a solution to this stuff. I just find this super interesting. I definitely believe that body is essential to selfhood, just because that seems to be so intrinsic in the scriptures. But I don't want to plant a flag in any particular theology around that just because. But I read the text, and it makes me ask the question. And once it's forced me to ask that question about what it means to be human, I find myself having to ask the other question. Who knows that the human spirit rises, but the animal spirit just returns to the earth? And I think to myself, do all dogs go to heaven? So I never wanted a dog. Kids wanted a dog. My wife wanted a dog. I was the holdout. Like 10 years or something. We want a dog. No. Mom! No, your dad's never going to. Finally, one day, they wore me down. So I went actually all by myself. So I didn't even let on that I was going to do this. I just went to the pet store. And I walked in to meet some puppies. And there were some puppies like, pick me, pick me, pick me. And then there was this one like fuzzy little brown thing like this who was like, and I kind of picked her up and she sort of leaned into me like, so she picked me. So I brought my wife to visit. She was doing the same thing. I know you. And then we bought the dog, and we had to pick up the dog. It was the same day we were picking up our kids from church camp. So we went to get them from church camp, and then we're driving back. They didn't know this is, where are we going? We're going to get our new dog. And she was this little brown furry thing. She was a Lhasa Apso, but they decided to name her Fuzzy. And it was really an interesting experience to have a dog. She ended up being quite large. A Lhasa should be, 15, 16 pounds, and she ended up 22 pounds. Yeah, she was a big girl. When she was really little, I would try to take her for a walk, but it was more like taking her for a drag. And then one day she stopped fighting me and she went, oh no, this is good. Fast forward just a couple years, and there I am on rollerblades. Can you picture me on rollerblades? And she's pulling me down the road, this 22-pound dog, pulling me down the road. I'm just like hanging on for dear life, and she's shoom, and we would, yeah. And she lived a really good long life. And it was hard when she died, And then we got another dog. All right, so my wife says, let's look at puppies. So we go look at puppies, and there was this one little puppy. This is a Shih Tzu puppy now, black and white Shih Tzu puppy, who came right over to me, picked me. I have learned from the first dog, and that was true with this one too, they're just trying to use me to get to her, you know, right? And, but we ended up with our second dog. Her name was Hannah. And she loved winter. She would go and rub her face in the snow and stuff like that. And this is a Shih Tzu, right? So we had a Lhasa Apso. Now we get a Shih Tzu. Shih Tzus are supposed to be 10, 11 pounds. She was the same, like, dimensions and weight as our Lhasa. 22 pounds. She was a big girl. We used to call her a Sheets Moose. and it was funny. I would open the door for her to go outside. And I would open the door like this wide, which is about, at least half to all of her body length more than what she needed to go through, and she wouldn't until I opened it like wide enough for a person. And then she'd be like, okay, now I can pass. She just had this sense of herself as enormous, like she didn't just slip by things. She was like, and she was very sweet, and she was good with other dogs. She spent a lot of time in doggy daycare, so whereas our first dog never knew she was a dog, this one did, but she also knew that she belonged in two worlds. There was a dog world that she was totally comfortable with, and a people world that she was totally comfortable with. And I was really intrigued by the fact that she had a different personality than the first one. Like, how is that even possible? Different personality. And then after she died it was right in the kind of beginning few months of COVID, and then we got another dog, our current dog, Koa. She also is a Shih Tzu. She is the correct size. She's 11 pounds. And she's a little bit of a scaredy cat because she never really hung out with other dogs. So she sees another dog, and she's like, pick me up. I don't want to have anything to do with this one. Or she'll turn around and head the other way, sometimes very aggressively. You know how dogs talk to you and they tell you what they want, right? But they have this weird way of doing it. Like one of them will stand by the door and make that weird, like, snorty noise out of their, like they're sneezing. And what that means is I have to go to the bathroom. But it takes a while for you to figure that out, right? And then one of ours, she would just come and she would do this. And then what do you need? And you start going through the list. Do you need water? Do you need food? Do you need a snack? And at some point you hit the right one, like, you got to go potty, and she goes, like, that's it, let's go. Koa, our current dog, she'll look, stare at me. What do you want? It doesn't matter what I say. If I say something, she starts to move, so I have to get up and follow her. And then, I don't know, we have a galley kitchen, so you go in the kitchen over here by the dining room table, and then you go like this, and then now you're in the living room, and then, and so that's what she'll start to, we'll like circle that a couple of times. I don't know why, right? We'll circle a few times, and then at some point she'll either guide me to a door or guide me to where the treats are or something and say, it's time for my special treat. It's got to be like about 7:30. We do this thing now. But she always makes me circle a few times, which I always thought was weird. Now, I said that at the other church, and afterwards, Art comes up to me and he goes, your first dog, you were young, so she pulled you around. This one, she's helping you get your steps because she knows you're old. That's probably true. Each one a different personality. Each one unique, different. Each one capable of love. Each one capable of devotion. It's possible. Each one, how is it possible for a dog and a human being to have a relationship and yet that's totally there? It's like, how does that work? And yet when you think about the terms that I just used, relationship, love, devotion, we use that same language to talk about God. That God, by God's very nature, is relationship in the Godhead. That's what the Trinity is all about. Don't try to solve it, with your brain. Just recognize that it means that at the very basis of God, the reality of who God is relationship. And here that shows up in creation. We have relationships with our dogs, or if Sam was here, I'd say cats. But we have relationships with these. And a dog in the wild doesn't have that relationship, so a dog in the wild is different than the dogs in our homes. They might even be the same breed, but they're different because the relationship is lacking, but the capacity for the relationship is there. And the love, God is love. And the personality, this is one of the things about Christian theology is distinct from some other religious traditions, is we actually think about God as person, having God has an identity. God is not just the divine whatever, but a person. And there we see it in the creation. Creation reveals the work of God. The handiwork of God is revealed in everything God has made. And so I look at this and I go, well, that really becomes the question. I mean, are we really distinct from the natural world? Or are we really supposed to be part of it? Because, in Genesis 1, when it describes the creation of human beings, it says that God makes human beings responsible for everything else. Yes, I know your English translation uses the word dominion and authority, but those words, biblically speaking, mean responsibility for, not lord over. Jesus makes that clear himself. So we're given responsibility for the world. In the second creation story, Genesis 2, when God forms that human being, God is making a gardener. It actually says that, and God placed Adam, the human being, into the garden to take care of it. So in both the first story of creation and the second story of creation, we're supposed to be taking care of the creation. We have not done a very good job. I just learned this the other day. So the earth has a tilt. That's why we have seasons. In the last just about 20 years, we have managed to change the tilt of the earth by 31.5 inches. Now that seems like a very small amount. But in 20 years, we did that. And we did that by pumping groundwater to use in all kinds of other ways, thereby shifting the center of gravity of the earth. We human beings successfully shifted the earth by just under a yard. How's that for impressive? And a little scary. We are responsible for the world. It is our job. That's how we were created. Which means we're part of it, part of that very creation. So that certainly seems to come through. But I still find myself going, but then why should I imagine? I mean, it would be easy then to conclude, like in Ecclesiastes, to say, just assume, well, then we all just go down, the breath of the spirit of, we all just end up in the same place as animals. But instead I find myself asking, no, really, don't all dogs go to heaven? What is it that makes for the lasting and eternal? And I can't help but wonder if it's just love. I mean, my dog loves me, which I know is weird. I love my dog, which I don't like to admit. Because I'm manly. But you knew that, I know. But there's love there, love. And what are we told in the scriptures about love? The first thing we're told in Song of Songs is that love is stronger than death. And what's the other thing we're told about love? God is love. So, is there a lasting and persistent reality which is not just ourselves, but also Fuzzy and Hannah and Koa and whatever ones you would name? I think the answer is yes. Because I think love is the evidence of that. I think love is the proof of that. And so I make that observation, that thing that happens. You know how you see the bumper sticker, Lord, help me to be the person my dog thinks I am? That's a pretty good prayer. Because dogs are faithful and loyal, and they look at us with this unconditional love, and they're full of forgiveness, and they're full of grace, and I realized that having a dog made me a better human being. This is so universally true that in some prisons they use taking care of dogs as a way of helping prisoners rehabilitate. The same prisoners who might maybe have murdered humans, suddenly when there's a dog they've got to take care of, here's this poor animal that they brought into the shelter and the prisoner's now taking care of the dogs, that changes them, makes them better people. My dogs have made me a better human being. And if being in a relationship with a dog makes me a better human being, how much more being in a relationship with the Almighty God? Can you find the prayer of response, and please stand as we pray together. I've seen the bumper sticker, Lord, help me to be the person my dog thinks I am. It's a good prayer. Funny that I can want to be a better person because of a dog, and that a dog can actually help me be a better person. Maybe it is not so funny after all. In all of creation, your hand is evident. Unconditional love, sacrificial devotion, individuality, personality, relatedness, your eternal attributes are clearly revealed in what you have made. So thank you for dogs and cats, horses and cows, birds and fish, and all the rest. And thank you that I can become a better person because of my relationship with my dog. And now let me become better yet because of my relationship with you. In Jesus' name, amen. We'd love to have you join us for in-person worship Sunday morning at 8:30 at Christ United Methodist, or Sunday morning at 10:15 at Stanton United Methodist. And if Sunday morning is not your jam, join us Monday night, 6 o'clock at Christ United Methodist for Pizza Church. It's church, and then we eat pizza. Until next time, may the Lord God bless you and keep you. May the face of the Almighty be upon you, and may God grant you peace. Perfect peace. Oh, may God